one of the clear lessons from almost countless volcanic crises around the world is that it's very important to ensure that we have effective communication, particularly for communities that have been affected. So one of the clear lessons that we have from the collective experience, both from volcanoes, but also from earthquake, landslides, flooding disasters, is that it's much more effective if we communicate about what the potential impacts will be to people and what can they do about it. So often there's a tendency, or it can be slightly easier to simply talk about the phenomena that's occurred, such as the volcanoes erupted and this is what's happening. And on one level, that's important. It's useful and important contextual information for people to understand what's happening and to make meaning of that. But certainly the empirical evidence suggests that it's much more effective to talk about what are the impacts. So what are the consequences on me? What is potentially going to happen to me or my family? And what can I do about it? And ensuring that that's clear and often repeated multiple times with people that are under stress or feeling anxious. Often it can take 2 or even 3 times to hear what's being said. So that's one of the really important things that's often put forward. I think the other important principle of again, which has been very well understood or found in multiple disaster settings, is ensuring that we're empowering people with information for them to make appropriate decisions. So trying to ensure that information is coming out in a timely and understandable manner during a crisis is, I'm sure we all agree, really, really important, but often incredibly challenging for emergency managers or other agencies that are responding to the event to try and ensure that occurs. So that's why it's a disaster. It's really, really challenging, and there's the systems are being overwhelmed. So again, that's where any preparations that we can make, both at the individual level, so in terms of household and getting ourselves prepared, but also, as us scientists or as emergency managers, being cognizant or being aware of what are the needs that people will have in terms of how we should be and can be most effectively communicating with them is really, really important. And I think for us as a scientific community, that's something that we need to continue to upskill ourselves in, and to ensure that whilst we have all of our super robust academic training, it's important that if we are going to work in these applied settings, that we also have that training and that understanding of how we can most effectively contribute to emergency responses. Because we are seeing scientists increasingly integrated and quite substantially into disaster risk management and particularly the disaster responses, which is a fantastic thing. We want to ensure that we've got the best possible information being used, but it means that scientists also need to be trained up and have that capability and competency to be able to do that robustly and effectively. So it's an exciting new time, I think, for 21st century scientists operating in the disaster space. In addition to all our normal training, we should be ensuring that we're well equipped to help out in this important societal. What am I trying to say here? I think it's really important that scientists are able to competently interact with society and communicate, particularly during these crisis events. I mean, if we take the context here in New Zealand, where over the last decade, we've had 3 very big disasters, and science has been at the heart of responding and ensuring that we recover from all of them. But the clear lesson for the scientific community is we can't just be talking to ourselves in a little echo chamber. We've got to be able to talk across disciplines and often in an interdisciplinary way, where we're collaborating with engineers, we're collaborating with social scientists, collaborating with physical scientists, and even lawyers and policymakers, and of course our political leaders. Sadly, it happens everywhere. One of the big lessons from New Zealand with the Canterbury earthquake disaster, which you might recall from 2010, 2011. I mean, the physical effects of the disaster were, of course, very severe. But the way that our disaster recovery occurred was very comparable to what you've just described, where there was a lot of it that was very opaque at times, very difficult to understand how people's homes would be rebuilt, or, you know, how much cover would they have, how much money they're going to get. And that creates a disaster in its own right. You know, it's that human construct around how we're recovering to it is, and responding to these events can be just as important as the actual geophysical event that's occurred. So it's such a challenging environment. And I mean, my take on it, at least, is usually everybody involved is trying their absolute best to help and do their utmost. But it's again, it comes down to ensuring that that people are at the centre, and particularly those that are affected are at the centre of every disaster response and disaster recovery, and trying to learn those lessons that have been hard won elsewhere is really important. I actually totally agree. I think it does require some brave politicians and or public servants to be able to have those conversations. And I think, again, we've got to look at it from the perspective of those that are affected. If we were able to say, if you were told, we just don't have any information for you, how do you make proper, or how can you make decisions? Because often it's, the human psyche will be, well, okay, well, I'll just hang on, hopefully something will happen. And whereas if you're able to say, as you say, look, but it's going to be 4 years before we have anything in terms of, whatever the key decision that needs to be made. People can get on with things at that point, so, right, all right, well, I'll leave the community, go do something else for a bit, then I'll come back, or I'll, get on with another business, or right, okay, that means I need to be thinking about where am I going to live for 4 years before I can rebuild, or whatever the case is.
Yeah,
I think the challenge though is often it's very hard to, a decent forecast of what that time, that decision-making time window, or how long those things will take, where there's that urgency to try and say, right, we're going to get all this sorted in the next 2 or 3 months, but actually it's going to take years because of whatever the situation is. So it's just hard, and it's I don't think this is isolated to La Palma. It's certainly something that we see globally. Yeah, it's having anything that can capture these lessons is unbelievably valuable, and particularly for volcano disasters, there's such a lack of study compared to the likes of earthquake or flood or whatever. So